After the surprise success of God of War 1, Sony went to Sony Santa Monica and told them, hey, that last game did great, we need you to make another one. They gave them a tight deadline, but they managed to get the game out. And while in many ways God of War 2 is an upgrade from the first entry, I do have to say that at least gameplay-wise, it did not stick the landing in the end. Now, I do genuinely love this game, but the ending, the last 4 hours, didn't go well for me. I didn't enjoy it that much. But as any good retrospective goes, I can't just give you that and expect you to just take all of it and not elaborate further. So welcome to the Den, friends. I'm Strider Fox, and welcome to my thoughts and feelings on God of War 2. Now, with my retrospectives, I like to start at the main menu, and every good main menu should give you a taste of the vibe of the game that you're about to get into, and God of War 2 managed to do that very well. The music is very God of War. It's the standard vibe that you would expect from the Greek games. And the main menu shows Kratos as the God of War, but only one half of his face with the menu icons on the other side of the screen, very similar to the menu from God of War 1. Now, getting into the game itself, Kratos is now the God of War, but he is shunned by the other gods on Olympus. One day he hears a Spartan calling for help, and Kratos joins them in destroying a city. Athena herself tries to stop Kratos, but Kratos goes to Rhodes anyway, and proceeds to start causing chaos. An eagle then swoops down and takes some of the power out of Kratos, causing him to shrink back to a normal size as the eagle pumps the god power into the Colossus of Rhodes, bringing it to life. And I love that they open this game with an incredible set piece. Seeing just all of that Kratos in his massive size stomping through a city, only to be drained of most of his power and see that power going into the Colossus of Rhodes, where then the Colossus takes Kratos' place and starts wreaking havoc through the city and killing Spartans, was a perfect way to get people hyped for the game that they're about to play. Now in this game, Kratos does not wield the Blades of Chaos, because those were lost at the end of God of War 1. So instead he has the Blades of Athena, which are just the Blades of Chaos. They function exactly the same power set, similar design. For all intents and purposes, they are the Blades of Chaos, but technically they are not, because these were made by Athena to replace the weapons that Ares took from him. And when Kratos starts this game, he has most of his combos unlocked at the beginning, but the only magic he has is Poseidon's Rage. Combat feels just as good as the first game, excellent flow, excellent use of, using your combos to defeat the enemies in stylish, brutal fashion. And now after Kratos got shrunk down, he ends up facing off against a bunch of soldiers before pulling a gate open to move forward. Kratos pushes forward as the Colossus begins to attack, trying to smack him from while he is within a building. Kratos eventually gets to an area where he fires a ballista, but the living statue catches the boulder that he fires, and crushes it. So instead, Kratos stuns the Colossus and then launches himself from the ballista. And this is our first QTE, and the God of War games are known for set pieces, epic boss battles, and QTEs. And let me just tell you, there will be a lot of QTEs throughout this game. And now I don't personally dislike QTEs. I definitely believe they have their place in games. Some games do overuse them, some games really could benefit from them, but they're a great way to do really cool dramatic pieces that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do with your standard control scheme. After stunning the Colossus and launching himself from the ballista, he stabs it in the eye, only to get thrown across the city. Now, this game introduces grapple points to the series, where Kratos can throw his blades into the thing and swing around from it. And this extra little addition to traversal is always welcome. I love when games give us traversal in any form, whether that be climbing up walls, swinging from points, or even just jumping from enemy to enemy. Traversal in games is always an extra good way to spice up the game's feeling and, like, you know, its vibe. It's a great way to look like a badass. Give us a cool way to move around the area and you will always look exponentially cooler. As Kratos moves through this new area of the city, the Colossus constantly tries to stomp on him by, you know, just slamming its foot through the roof of the buildings, because subtlety be damned in this game. But the God of War pushes it back when it seems that he's about to be squished like an ant. Kratos eventually gets to the roof and battles with the statue again before getting thrown away once again. Kratos then solves a pressure plate puzzle to continue on his path forward. And this puzzle in particular wasn't too hard, but the puzzles in the last game weren't that hard, so at this point I didn't really expect the puzzles to be that much of an upgrade. But let me tell you, immediately right now, this game its puzzles are a mixed bag, but I can definitely say with certainty they put a lot more effort into these puzzles, although some of them do feel a little obtuse at times. Some of the puzzles were very easy, very straightforward, and some of them did not make a lot of sense. And I actually had to, several times, look up a walkthrough to figure out what I was supposed to do, because I just couldn't figure out this solution they intended me to find. And now some of the puzzles were just me being stupid. I will accept that. I'm kind of dumb at sometimes when it comes to puzzles. But there were puzzles in this game that just they didn't make sense. They either went against something I had been taught previously in this game, or just straight up weren't things I was taught with that I could do, or sometimes I just couldn't even tell that I was supposed to climb a certain wall in a puzzle. Very mixed bag. I wish the puzzles were better, but at the end of the day, God of War isn't really a puzzle game, it's hack and slash, so you can't fault them too much. But it was definitely a bit of a low point whenever I just found a puzzle that made absolutely no gosh darn sense. When Kratos gets out of the building that he's currently in, Zeus sends the Blade of Olympus down to him, and Kratos fights through many soldiers to get to the sword. When he finally grabs the Blade of Olympus, he drains all of his godhood into it to use the blade to destroy the Colossus of Rhodes. Now, this part was the first of several frustrating sections of combat where I either couldn't tell what I was supposed to do, or what I was supposed to do was just really jankily implemented. Because by the noise that the... Okay, let me breathe here. The Colossus of Rhodes, the fight with it was very frustrating, because you needed to stun it and then periodically drain your power into the blade, removing the magic power that you have, your extra magic bar, your magic bar, your health, and your red orbs. And if you tried to drain your godhood into the blade while the Colossus wasn't stunned, it would smack you out of it. So the first one is, pretty straightforward. It's pretty obvious. You throw a chunk of stuff into the Colossus to stun it. And then after that, with the noises that it made when you hit the Colossus, they're the same or similar noises that the game makes when you're hitting something you cannot break, and it just makes a clink noise. So I couldn't tell if I was actually damaging it until it was stunned. So using the magic was pretty good way to get it stunned, because that one felt really reliable. But then when it came down to me smacking it with the Blades of Athena, I just, I couldn't tell. And then I ended up dying several times because I was unsure if I was doing the right thing. I did not have to look up a walkthrough for this part. I did eventually figure it out, but they should have given it like particle effects or a different sound effect so it didn't sound like I was just wailing on something that doesn't break. But after that, Kratos ends up going into the Colossus of Rhodes, climbing through it and destroying it from the inside out. Now this section was a really, really fun bit. It was, it's one of those set pieces where it's not really hard, it's just there to look cool, just to get the feel of climbing through this living statue, smashing it from the inside, and destroying the cores where the magic is pooled that's giving it life. It was a lot of fun. Kratos, after destroying a massive chunk of the inside of the statue, leaves out of the statue and begins to gloat, only for the collapsing Colossus's hand to come down and squash Kratos. And now that Kratos is mortal from draining all of his godhood into the Blade of Olympus, this greatly injures him, near killing him. But Kratos drags himself to pick up the sword of the Blade of Olympus to regain his godhood, only for the eagle to land and transform into Zeus, revealing the eagle was Zeus the whole time. And Zeus picks up the Blade of Olympus and stabs Kratos with it through the gut, killing him. But he only does this after Kratos refuses to serve the gods, because I guess for some reason Zeus thought that this man would ever serve him. I don't know if it was Zeus being an idiot or Zeus just toying with Kratos, but regardless, Kratos refuses to serve and is put down by the King of Olympus. Now, with the fully powered up Blade of Olympus, Zeus proceeds to wipe out the entirety of this Spartan army in Rhodes, while Kratos is dragged down into Hades. But someone stops Kratos' descent, and it turns out Gaia, the Queen of the Titans, the Titan god whatever of life itself, creation, reveals herself and vows to help Kratos destroy the gods that have shunned him and have now attempted to kill him. She revives Kratos and sends him on to find the Sisters of Fate, the only people who can allow him to change his fate and regain his godhood. Now this was a really neat cinematic, and it's something that a lot of games don't need to do or just don't do at all, that really, I find it really cool. This scene reveals that the narrator of the first game, the woman who is, talking about Kratos' past, narrating what Kratos is doing, that was Gaia. She tells Kratos that she has been there his whole life following him, and it's proven by her being the narrator of the last game. She truly has been there the whole time. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to do that at all. But the fact that they did give a voice and a reason and a name to the narrator from the first game, and it being Gaia herself, excellent. 10 out of 10 with that reveal. Kratos climbs up out of the pit that he was dragged into and returns to Rhodes, only to be met with the destroyed city and the corpses of the men he fought alongside. But as Kratos investigates and looks at the bodies in the area around him, he finds one soldier still lives, and Kratos sends him home, back to Sparta to defend the city as a Pegasus lands and Kratos takes the Pegasus off to his destination. When Kratos gets onto the beast, he demands that it take him to Olympus, but Gaia instead sends him after the Sisters of Fate. As previously mentioned, they are the key to him regaining his godhood. This leads to a pretty fun little set piece of Kratos flying around fighting griffins on the back of a Pegasus, where you control the Pegasus moving up, down, left, and right, all around, except forward or backwards, while facing off against flying enemies, the griffins, that are trying to stop him from reaching his destination. And I I know that there are definitely some people that don't like flying sections like this, like honor rail sections in games. I don't mind when they're done right, and this game definitely did do this right. I loved the Pegasus sections. As Kratos flies, he eventually lands in the lair of the Titan, as his steed is pinned under a giant's hand. Kratos here finds his first Gorgon Eye. Now, Gorgon Eyes, just like God of War 1, are a collectible where you collect enough of them and it will upgrade your maximum health. Now I guess is as good as time any to talk about chests. So, as in the last game, you have red orb chests that will grant you red orbs. You have green chests that grant you health, blue chests that grant you magic, and then uncolored chests that have a chance to either grant you red orbs, a phoenix feather, or a Gorgon Eye, and I'll explain the phoenix feathers when I get to them. But this game introduced a different kind of chest, a gold chest that will give him orbs that will power up his power-up form for this game, a power called the Rage of the Titans, which we will get into a bit later. Kratos climbs through these icy caverns, fighting off undead soldiers and monsters, and here is another one thing that did frustrate me a little bit, just a bit of a disappointment. So, I don't mind that this game reuses certain enemies from the first one. I don't mind that at all. And if anything, I think that's a great way to save on, resource time, especially when you got a tight budget or deadline, tight deadline. You also had a tight budget, but the thing that frustrates me is for the enemies that made a return from God of War 1, they have the exact same glory kill animations. They didn't make new ones for the returning enemies, and I feel like they really should have, but they probably just didn't because they didn't have the time. And if they didn't, I get that, but I would have liked to see new animations for returning enemies to spice it up a bit, so it didn't just feel like rehashing the combat of the first game. Kratos comes out of these first caves into a area of open skies and snow, where he sees a massive eagle pecking at the guts of a chained-up man. Kratos scares off the eagle and speaks to the man, who reveals himself to be the Titan Prometheus, who says that he was imprisoned here by Zeus for bringing fire to mortals. He begs for the ghost of Sparta to release him from his torment and kill him finally. So, Kratos cuts the chains binding him, but it isn't enough, as Prometheus is hooked onto one chain, dangling over a flaming pit, and Prometheus tells Kratos that he must burn in the fires of Olympus to truly die. So Kratos ventures back into the ice caves and faces off with a few Gorgons, who function exactly like they did in the first game. They have eye beams that they hold on you, and if they hold on you too long, you get turned to stone. You gotta wiggle your stick to break out of the stone, but if you get hit while you're stone, you die. And for the most part of this game, Gorgons weren't that frustrating. They were fairly easy to deal with. But there was one section near the end of the game where the Gorgons are powered up and they have a flash freeze ability, where they can just instantly turn you to stone. And that part, I'll get to that part when I get to that part, but that part pissed me off. But for now, they don't have the flash freeze ability, and are just, normal roadblock enemies. Kratos moves through the caves and comes face to face with the Titan Typhon, who blows a freezing wind. Now, Typhon is the Titan of this area, and he is the one whose hand is currently on top of the Pegasus. So Kratos hides from the breath that would otherwise blow him off the pathway, and eventually climbs up to a spot where he jumps and attacks Typhon, cutting into his eye and pulling out a bow. But this part glitched in my game, where, you know what, I'll just show you. So yeah, that happened. That was funny. Now this game did have a couple of glitches. This one, as far as I can tell right now in reading over my notes, is the only one I can remember where it was an animation glitch and not anything else. But there were several cutscenes where the audio had glitched and Kratos' voice was very, very quiet, like near inaudible, but everyone else was just fine. And this game didn't have subtitles, so I don't know exactly what he said in those sections. But now I'm wondering if is this a problem with my disc in particular? Because I played this on the HD collection version, which was HD remasters or HD ports of God of War 1 and 2 over to the PS3. So I don't know if this was a bug in the original release, or if it's a bug in the HD collection, or if it was just my disc in particular that was bugged. But those audio glitches happened several times throughout the game. But regardless, Kratos gets Typhon's Bane, the bow, out of the Titan's eye, and uses it to escape the cavern and return to Prometheus as the Titan Typhon screams out to Kratos that he will pay for what he's done. But Kratos does not care, he does not listen, he just keeps moving forward. Using this new bow, Kratos cuts Prometheus down, dropping him into a massive pyre that is apparently some of the fires of Olympus. And Gaia then binds the ashes of Prometheus to Kratos, giving him the Rage of the Titans ability, which earlier I mentioned that yellow chests will give him power for the Rage of the Titans. That is this game's power state, and it functions exactly like Wrath of the Gods did in the first one, where he becomes near invincible, his attacks do a lot more damage, and it is timed. You only have a certain amount of time to use his power. But, and this is one of the several areas where this game is an upgrade from God of War 1. You have the ability to turn off the Rage of the Titans ability when you've turned it on. You don't just have to wait for it to run out of juice and then, oops, well, you only needed half of the Rage of the Titans for this combat encounter, but now you've got to completely refill your bar. You can just turn it off. Granted, you do need to fully refill the bar again to turn it back on, but with this quality of life feature, it makes using the Wrath of the Gods ability a lot more tempting, or the Rage of the Titans makes it a lot more tempting than using Wrath of the Gods, because I didn't have to worry about fully refilling my bar if I only needed a portion of the power. With this new ability acquired, Kratos heads back the way he came, towards the hand of Typhus that he needs to then use the new power to lift up the fingers to free his steed. Now, I want to say right now, the combos in this game, because if we're going to talk about the superpowered state, we should also talk about the combos. The combos are, well, there's a lot returning from the first game, but there's also a whole lot of new stuff. And my personal favorite with the Blades of Athena is called Rage of the Furies. It's a very, very quick combo that can deal a lot of damage very quickly if your blade hits will land. And it looks so cool. I will definitely say they upgraded the style of the combos and the animations in this game. With the Pegasus freed, Kratos takes it all the way out of this area and to the Island of Creation, the home of the Fates. Unfortunately, the Pegasus is killed, and Kratos brutally slays the Griffin rider responsible before plummeting down to the chariots pulling the island, catching himself on the cliffs at the Temple of Lachesis. And this area is where he finds his first Phoenix Feather. Now, Phoenix Feathers, like the Gorgon Eyes, are collectibles that you have to find enough of them to gain an upgrade to one of your bars. Where the Gorgon Eyes upgrade your health, the Phoenix Feathers upgrade your magic. Kratos eventually comes to a puzzle where he needs to use a dead body to weigh down a pressure plate, and this game uses bodies as movable weights several times, and I do like that was added in. That is definitely a really nice upgrade from just the basic push the big thing onto the button that you had in the last one. And the fact that we have different ways to weigh down pressure plates, aside from pushing things or things we can carry, definitely increases the ideas that you have to come up with to figure out how to solve these puzzles. But because now you can't just rely on, oh, find the big thing and push it. Now you might need to find a body and move it over. But you'll have to clear out the enemies that are between you and the plate, because if they hit you, obviously you'll drop the body. You can't just push the thing and move on. And upgrades to puzzles like these are definitely things I enjoyed seeing. I do wish they used the body as a pressure plate weight thing more. They only used it like 2 or 3 times in this game. I can't remember the exact count, but they didn't use it enough. They definitely should have used it more. As Kratos moves through the temple, he asks Gaia why she aids him, and she explains the story of how Rhea, the father to Zeus and the wife to Kronos, tricked the Titan into saving the life of her son Zeus, because Kronos knew that the gods were going to usurp him. He was told his fate by the sisters that he would be killed by his son, or he would be defeated by his son. So, what was Kronos' master plan to prevent this from happening, you might ask? Eat his children. I'm not joking. His plan to prevent being usurped by his son was to eat his son. Now, if any of you are familiar with Greek mythology, you already knew that. If you're not, how are you not familiar with Greek mythology at this point? Like, come on. I'm not making videos for little kids. You should know this by now. But, in any case, Rhea tricks Kronos into eating a rock instead of Zeus, and sends Zeus away to be raised by the Titan Gaia. And when Gaia has raised Zeus up to, old enough for Zeus to free his brothers, he frees his brothers from Kronos' belly. But Gaia made a mistake here, because she nurtured and cultivated a hatred for the Titans in Zeus. And that was going to come back to bite her. And by that, I mean the Titanomachy. But we'll get into the rest of that when the game gets to that. Now, moving through the 2 temples attached to the chariots, Kratos encounters his first Cerberus of the game. And while they do look a little different, at least one version of them looks different. Apparently, I don't think I ever wrote this down in my notes, but in the latter half of the game, we run into Cerberuses that look like the ones from the first game. They function exactly like the ones in the first game. They'll spit out little mini Cerberuses that you want to kill first, or they will grow big and be a pain in the butt. But with only having one here to deal with, the Wrath of the Titans ability shredded the Cerberus. It did not stand a lick of a chance. Now, this is the part where we really start to see the upgrades to traversal, aside from just the grapple point, because we can also hang from ceilings and climb across them in certain areas, which is an excellent upgrade to level design and traversal variability. Like I said before, adding different ways to traverse the areas will always make you look cooler. Kratos eventually comes to an elevator that he takes deeper into the Temple of Lachesis, where he sees a massive chain. Now in this room, Kratos fights off several sirens to destroy a stone door. Unfortunately, I can't show you this fight with the sirens, because this is YouTube, and YouTube doesn't like indecent monster exposure. So, you'll have to use your imagination for this one. But in any case, Kratos kills the sirens, pushes onward, and walks across the chain to come to the Steeds of Time, which were apparently a gift from Kronos to the Fates, in an attempt to gain favor, possibly to have them alter his fate to prevent him from facing off against his son in the future. Which, I guess maybe that's why he decided to eat his children, because they he wasn't able to gain favor with the sisters, so they refused to change his fate, so he had to try and change it himself, which ended up leading into him ensuring his fate, because that is how this stuff goes. And don't you just love a cycle of patricide? Kratos climbs out from the chain and runs out to the steeds, where he comes to a door requiring something called the Horsekeeper's Key in order to move onward, so Kratos has to set out and find it. Kratos eventually runs into Theseus, who is the one holding the Horsekeeper's Key, and he is here to protect the fates for Zeus. So I guess Zeus also sent gifts to the fates in an attempt to gain favor. Now, Theseus is a pompous and arrogant asshole, so Kratos puts him down. Now, this is our first real boss fight. Like, the fight with the Colossus of Rhodes wasn't really a boss fight. Those were more of just action set pieces. But this is a boss fight. And as a first true boss, it was really fun. It requires thought. I can't just button mash my way through it. But, you know, it's a good boss. It was a fun boss to fight. And I definitely would fight this boss again. At the end of the fight, Theseus ends up falling from his perch that he jumped up to, leading to Kratos having to use the bow against him. And Kratos takes the Horsekeeper's Key from him before brutally killing him with the door that he opened with the key. Just like, so if you've ever seen Daredevil, if you've seen season 1 of Daredevil, you know how Kingpin kills a guy with a car door? That's pretty much what Kratos did to Theseus. So, yeah, Theseus isn't getting back up. He's gone. He's dead. And this game does have some incredible, brutal finishers for its enemies. The boss fights each have an excellent ending finisher. The enemies that have finishers, they're very decent. Some of them are reused, some of them aren't really worth mentioning other than the fact that they just genuinely just look generally cool, but they definitely cooked with the animation design for this game. Using the key, Kratos gains access to a message from Kronos, who gives him a new magic, the power of Kronos' Rage, which allows Kratos to place down orbs of lightning that damage and stun enemies around him. This ended up being probably my most used magic attack, because it is excellent for dealing a lot of hits, a lot of damage, and also keeping your enemies from hitting you. With this new power, Kratos goes out to the seeds and releases them from their bindings before whipping them into action, so they pull the island of creation to the chariots, giving Kratos his way onto the main island. Heading back from the temple, Kratos finally heads through new rooms, through new hallways to get to the island, and ends up coming to a puzzle with a moving statue. Unfortunately, Kratos needs something to hold down the pressure plate to lower the hands of the statue. But, lucky for him, he finds this item called the Amulet of Fates, which will allow him to temporarily slow down time when he's near a statue with a green ball on it. With this new power, Kratos doesn't need something to weigh down the statue, or weigh down the plate for the statue, because he can do it himself. He stands on the pressure plate, lowers the hands, and then slows time to make it up to the hands of the statue. Now, every single time you slow down time using the Amulet of Time, there's this green filter put over the screen, and it's very, very vibrant, and it kind of gave me a headache whenever I used it. I'm not a big fan of the green filter. I feel like if they toned down the saturation a bit, it probably would have been a lot less jarring. But, in any case, Kratos rides the hands up and speaks with the statue, which tells him, in the voice of a fate, that he will not succeed, and in anger, Kratos destroys its face before sending its head falling through an open window, or actually, through a closed window, opening it, and allowing Kratos to face off against another horde of monsters. The Statue of the Fate continues to taunt him as Kratos knocks it through the temple before finally destroying it for good, and arriving at the island of creation proper. In the Atrium of Destiny, Kratos faces off against several Cyclopses as a force field blocks his path. After slaughtering the enemies, Kratos has to find a way to destroy the force field. Eventually, he pushes two statues in the way of the beams coming from the big statue's eyes, and the force field is lowered, allowing him to progress into a bog. Finally leaving the temple, Kratos encounters the flaming form of the barbarian king that he had killed way back before God of War 1, and he hooks his blades into the barbarian king's horse, getting dragged along. The barbarian says that he crawled out of Hades and came to change his fate to ensure that he would not lose to Kratos. But, alas, a boss fight ensues, and the barbarian king is once again vanquished by the Ghost of Sparta. Now, this fight was definitely a little bit harder than Theseus's, but not by much. You pretty much just had to fight him until you knocked him off his horse, and then fight him as he summons barbarians. And then once you kill the extra barbarians he summons, and then you kill him again, Kratos takes the barbarian's hammer. And now this right here, the barbarian's hammer, is the first secondary weapon you get. And I never used it. I didn't like it, not at all. And this is an issue I have with God of War 2. So in the first game, God of War 1, every single piece of equipment you have has its use. Every tool in your toolbox will be needed. Every single magic, every single weapon, every single whatever. That is not how it is in God of War 2. In God of War 2, Kratos comes across two secondary weapons throughout the course of the game, until having it rounded off with a third being the Blade of Olympus that you get at the end for use in New Game Plus. And he also gets 4 different magics. And I did not use my magics as much variation as I did in the first game. There really wasn't any need. Aside from a couple of encounters, I never needed to use one specific magic beam, which we'll get into when we get it, and almost the entirety of the game had me swapping magic-wise between Typhus's Bane and the lightning ball we got from Kronos. And as for the weapons, you only really need one. You can take 2. I mean, the Blades of Athena are always going to be your default. But after that, you could use your secondary weapons, but you don't have to. You never have to. And that frustrates me. I don't like that they're pointless unless you specifically prefer to play that style. Because it's less of an incentive to use my equipment. When, well, the Blades of Athena work just fine. I'll just use those. Granted, the second secondary weapon, the Spear of Destiny, is probably my favorite weapon in the game. I am actually putting it above the Blades of Athena. But after you get the Spear of Destiny, if you like the Spear of Destiny, you never have to use the Blades of Athena. They don't have purpose altogether. They kind of become redundant. And the hammer has slow, heavy swings. Sure, I think it does good damage, but I don't know because I didn't use it. Primarily because it takes away your dodge roll. If you're using the hammer, the barbarian hammer, then you cannot roll around, which is not great when you need to be able to move around quickly in combat to avoid damage. But in any case, Kratos takes the barbarian hammer from the barbarian king and kills the barbarian king before moving onward. With the barbarian king dead for a second time, Kratos ventures off through the bog and eventually comes to the Temple of Uriel. Now, I'm going to say this right now. For the entire time of this section, up until the end, I thought Uriel was one of the Fates. She, in fact, is not one of the Fates. We will meet her at the end of this temple. But the front door to the Temple of Uriel is blocked by a Medusa door that will send out a freezing beam if you stand in front of it. So Kratos needs to find a way through it, but for now, he has no way through it. So instead he circles around the side to find a locked gate. With this gate locked and the front door inaccessible, he goes around the other side to find a way in. Kratos eventually sees two Minotaurs drag a Spartan away, which is a little interesting because I thought all of the Spartans were killed, yet here's a Spartan soldier right here. Kratos gives chase but is blocked by a bunch of toxic mud. So he'll need to find a way around the toxic mud. He takes Uriel's key off a corpse and goes back to the sealed gate, unlocking it. He then encounters some weird pigmen things that summon Cyclops and ride them, giving them extra attacks and more damage. This was a really interesting pair-up, having enemies that you want to get rid of before they climb onto Cyclops to make them even more dangerous. Another excellent way to shake up combat from what we had in the first game. In the end, they don't prove much of an issue, and Kratos pulls the soldiers off the beasts, killing the soldiers, and then rips the Cyclops eye out of the Cyclops. And apparently getting 10 eyes will unlock a bonus treasure, or 20 eyes will unlock a bonus treasure, but I never ended up getting 20 eyes. In fact, after this point here, aside from one other Cyclops later in the game, I never got the prompt to do the quick, the QTE kill that gives him the eye, so I don't know why I never got that option again. I don't know if I just did something wrong. It was very unclear. So I don't know if I missed out on something that would have made the end of the game a lot easier, because I was never prompted to take out the eye. And I was prompted with QTE kills, finishers on the Cyclopses, but it just did the standard one of punch it, run under it, climb up it, stab it in the eye. So I don't know what I was intended to do there. Very unclear. Should have given us more instruction on that. Instructions unclear, stabbed the eye instead. In any way, Kratos, after killing this new group of enemies, gets back on track and enters some caves next to the temple. Pushing past through these caves, Kratos comes to a further section of the temple where he solves another knee pressure plate puzzle. This game loves its pressure plate puzzles. And this one was, just like before, not that hard. Kratos sees several Spartan soldiers fighting off monsters in the distance as he jumps across moving floating platforms. Kratos comes to a chain on a tree that is guarded by a stone golem in the shape of the undead Minotaur that Kratos had killed back in the Challenge of Hades, and Kratos destroys this thing with ease. Now, this mini-boss, this golem, you encounter these things several times. There's a total of 4 of them in the game, and by the third one, I was getting really tired of fighting this boss again. It has 2 attacks that it can do, and their combos are very long. You can't damage them while they're in their combo, because if you get too close, which is just close enough to damage it, you'll get hit by the entire combo and lose a massive amount of health. So you essentially have to get into a rhythm of hit, wait 3 minutes, hit, wait 3 minutes. Now granted, it wasn't 3 minutes, I'm exaggerating there, but slowing down the pacing to the point where I can get 2 hits and then have to sit through a long-ass combo before I can get 2 more hits in really frustrated me. Kind of felt like they were padding these sections out every single time they gave me a Golem Minotaur. But he kills the beast and pulls down the tree, using it as a path to continue forward. He eventually comes to a platform where he hears a scream and sees that the soldier has died to the monsters that it was fighting. Kratos was unable to save this Spartan. Pushing forward and moving across some moving machines, I had a funny moment where I was fighting monsters on the moving path with Medusa beams, and I broke out of the freezing state on seemingly the exact same frame that an enemy hit me. So I died, but I kept fighting as it showed me I was dead. So yeah, that was a funny way to die. But I redid that section and I moved onward. Kratos circles back to the place where he got his first Cyclops eye, and he uses a piece of pillar as a second weight to hold down the edge of this moving piece of temple before he flips the chunk of temple into the bog, giving him a pathway forward. Kratos eventually finds another Spartan, so there's another Spartan here, which is interesting because it seemed that the army was wiped out save for one more, yet here's a Spartan right here. Or maybe they weren't Spartans. I thought they were Spartans, they might not have been. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, granted I didn't think about this when I was writing my notes, these might not have been Spartans at all, because now I need to look something up, because Jason is here with the Golden Fleece, so were Jason and the Argonauts Spartans? Hold on, I'm gonna do a quick Google. I did a Google, and Jason and the Argonauts were a group of heroes from all across Greece. A few of them might have been Spartans, but they were not necessarily Spartans. But apparently that's who these soldiers are. They're the Argonauts. Which I feel like I probably should have known that the Argonauts were just heroes from all across Greece. But they looked like the Spartans. They might have reused the character models, which makes that a little confusing. But in any way, Kratos finds another warrior, and turns out there are a whole bunch of them here, and he finds one that is laying near death, and this soldier tells Kratos that a man named Jason has, quote-unquote, the fleece, which, that's how you find out, yeah, these are the Argonauts, because that's Jason with the golden fleece specifically. The soldier says that Jason needs Kratos' help, and Kratos picks up the dying soldier and uses him to break some gears. Granted, the soldier wasn't dead yet. He was still technically alive, and Kratos crushed him while he was alive just to break some gears to get forward, which really shows the brutality and the level of just uncare that Kratos has at this point. He is so fed up with everything that he doesn't even care if these random soldiers that are just here on an adventure die by horrible means. Kratos gets to the room where Jason is right as Jason is killed by the Cerberus. So, of course, Kratos kills the Cerberus responsible for killing Jason, and takes from its mouth the Golden Fleece. Now, this fight took me several tries. I don't like fighting Cerberuses. They're a pain in the butt. Major pain in the butt. But I get that that's that's mostly just how I play. Because you kind of have to fall into a rhythm of hit, hit, roll away, hit, hit, roll away. You don't really get to use your combos, because if you use your combos, you get locked into an animation that's so long that the Cerberus gets to counterattack you. And that is something that I've noticed with both God of War 1 and 2, that the game is built on combos, but there are a lot of enemies that you just cannot use your combos with. And I don't know if that's just me actually being bad at the game, or if that was intentionally done. I'm not quite sure, but it does throw me off. Kratos rips the Golden Fleece out of the monster's throat and puts it on, which allows him to deflect projectiles and beams, as well as gaining a counterattack to any parry. Now, throughout the first game and up until this point in the second game, Kratos can parry attacks by blocking at the right time, but only now can he counterattack out of a parry. And the timing it was really weird at first, really frustrating to get my head around, but once I did, I figured out how to deal with it pretty easily. It had a learning curve. And at the time of writing these notes for this part of the game, I didn't like the parry. I got good. I got used to it. I really enjoy using it now, so that was just a thing I had to learn to use. But now, with this new parry ability, Kratos returns to the Medusa door that he passed by earlier. And when he gets to the door, it fires its beam at him, but he uses the golden fleece to parry the beam back into the door, exploding the door, which was so God of War, so very Kratos. You gonna hit me with a laser beam? No, I'm gonna use your laser beam to destroy you. It is a neat mechanic, excellent animations, really cool. Just finally we can turn our enemies' attacks against them. Entering the, as I wrote in my notes, Medusa Temple, but entering the Temple of Uriel proper, Kratos encounters undead soldiers from the first game, but with his new abilities, they do not last long. Jumping down a ladder, Kratos encounters some chunky minotaurs, as I called them in my notes, with new weapons that come with new glory kills. That was quote-unquote really cool, according to my notes. And here's the glory kill. Hell yeah, really cool. I enjoyed that they didn't just throw the same minotaurs that they did from the last game. We do get new animations with new enemies. I like that the new enemies have their own unique animations. Moving on, Kratos sees another soldier, one of the Argonauts, break a crank off of a thing and then taunt Kratos before running away with said crank. So now Kratos has to figure out a puzzle in order to make his way forward, and this puzzle stumped me to the point in which I needed a walkthrough, because what I ended up having to do was you have to, so the elevator can be, there are two elevators, all right, and they can be cranked up and down from either elevator, but moving one moves the other equally. What I ended up having to do was take the first elevator just far enough down that Kratos could get under the grate, or the fence gate wall thing in front of him, and then be able to jump up onto the second one that is raised at the same level and use that as a jumping platform forward. I didn't figure that out because you have to be really, really precise with how high up you leave the elevator. But I don't know if that's just me not being good at the puzzle, or if that was not supposed to be as tight as it was. But that puzzle, that one did annoy me. As Kratos traverses the temple, a voice can be heard taunting him as he continues. Now, in my notes here, I wrote this down as one of the fates, because this was at the point where I still thought that Uriel was a fate. And what the next part of the notes are still true, even if the voice we heard isn't a fate. I love when antagonists are omnipresent in the story and or just the area, and like their presence is felt, they communicate with you, they taunt you throughout your level or throughout the game. It really makes it feel like they're one step ahead of you and that you're constantly trying to catch up to them, and I enjoy that when it comes to a game. But yeah, we get through the area. Turns out that voice was Uriel, who is not a fate, but in fact a Gorgon. Specifically the sister to Medusa, who was the Gorgon that, Kratos decapitates at the beginning of the first game. And she is pissed that Kratos killed her sister, which leads into a boss fight against Uriel. Now, every single boss in this game has multiple phases, and each phase, brings a little bit different. You have to adjust your playstyle or just how you're doing what you're doing in order to actually complete the phases. And this fight, a boss fight against a Gorgon, was incredible. Another A+ boss fight. I don't really have any notes for it, like things they could have done better. I definitely don't feel like this fight dragged on, but eventually, through blood, sweat, and not a lot of tears, because Kratos doesn't cry anymore. He's too busy being angry to cry. He battles the Gorgon and rips her head off. Just like we did to Medusa in the first game, he rips off Uriel's head, and Uriel's head becomes his third magic for this game, because Typhon's bow counts as a magic. So with Typhon's bow, Kronos' lightning ball, and now Uriel's head, Kratos only has one last magic to find, and he will find that much later. Now, Uriel's head functions exactly like Medusa's head did in the first game. You hold it up, the eyes shoot a beam, you hold that beam on an enemy long enough, they freeze to stone, you break them. I hardly ever used Uriel's head, aside from using it on sirens, because I never felt like I needed to, and I always felt like my magic bar would have better mileage if I used the lightning ball as opposed to freezing an enemy, because different enemies take a different amounts of time to freeze. And obviously level up the Medusa head or the Uriel head, and it will lessen the amount of time it takes to freeze enemies. But why would I freeze enemies when I can just stun them and deal damage instead of just stun them and then wail on them in particular until they break? The game, as much as I love this game, the game doesn't feel like it's balancing its magics as equally as the first game did. And it definitely doesn't throw sirens at me as frequently enough in this game to warrant needing to constantly think about, managing my magic bar for Uriel's head. Sirens were a much more frequent enemy in the first game, so I had to use Uriel's head more frequently. Or Medusa's head in the first game. But regardless, it is useful, it does have its place, even if its place is hardly ever touched on. And now with Uriel dead, Kratos begins his way out of the temple, using levers and the Amulet of Fates to traverse a puzzle of timed gates and moving pillars. This puzzle was not hard. It required tighter timing, but not so tight that I would call it bullshit, but definitely enough that it required thought and patience. It took me several tries, but I got through it without needing a walkthrough. Yippee wahoo me. I really enjoyed this one. Kratos eventually comes to an elevator where he is ambushed by a whole boatload of baby Cerberuses. So he fights off wave after wave of baby Cerberuses as this elevator moves up. Now passing into a cave, Kratos faces off against a second stone minotaur. This fight goes just like the last one did. Just whack, whack, sit and wait. Whack, whack, sit and wait. And like I said before, I don't like bosses that are designed that way. The second time, it was still neat. The first time was a novelty. Second time I was like, oh, I get to do this again. Well, now I know what to do, so I can do it easier. But as this boss shows up again later, I get tired of it very, very quickly. Kratos kills the stone minotaur along with the harpy adze and pushes on forward through more caves, destroying a bunch of reanimated skilly boys before coming to a stairwell leading out of the passage. Now, skeletons. I will explain these enemies here because they are going to be really, really frustrating later in the game. So the way they work is, skeletons, you knock them down, they will get back up a total of 3 times. The first time they get up, you stun them, they will collapse and get back up. Stun them, they will collapse, get back up again. After you knock them down the 3rd time, they will die. But if you can, they have a stun window, and if you use a finisher on them, they will break and they will not get back up. Right now, they're not that frustrating, because right now I'm not having to deal with them in a timed section. But trust me, later, much later, near the end of the game, they are going to be the beginning of my least favorite section in both of these games. I would argue that this section near the end of the game is worse than the tightrope section with the spinning blades at the top of the Trial of Hades. And if you guys remember how much I hated that section, yeah, no, it doesn't bode well for the section in this game. But Kratos climbs a stairwell and finds himself back at the Destiny's atrium. Using his new parry power, he destroys a wall that was spitting fire and continues on to a new path forward. Passing through a small cave, Kratos crosses a cliffside before coming to another statue that's making another magical energy wall. So this time, once again, like last time, Kratos needs to block the eyes of the statue in order to progress. But as of right now, he can't. And when Kratos enters this area, he has to face off, for the first time in this game, another group of returning enemies from the first game, the weird burrowing scythe guys. I fucking hate these guys. I try not to curse as heavily in my retrospectives, but holy shit, these things piss me off. Because you can't really block them. You hit them twice and then they'll burrow around and beat the crap out of you. I finally learned in this game there is a way to deal with them, and that's called knocking them up into the air and beating them up one by one in the air, because they can't burrow if you keep them in a loop of getting knocked into the air. It took me an entire game and a quarter of a game to figure this out. That one is on me. That goof is on me. I will accept that. I still do not like these enemies. They really, really ruin the flow and fun whenever they show up. After Kratos defeats the burrowing scythe enemies, he hears somebody calling out for help. But Kratos can't find them at the moment. Moving onward into the building, Kratos finds the man calling for help and encounters some summoners. These guys were really neat. They constantly summon up enemies to fight that you have to kill them. Even if you kill the summoner, the enemies they spawned will survive until you kill them. And they were an excellent shake-up for the battle flow, because these are enemies that you need to prioritize. When they come on the field, you get rid of them as quickly as possible, unless you want to be dealing with a crap ton of spawned enemies. And I love when games do that, and don't do it to the point that makes it annoying. The summoners never felt annoying, so they nailed that there. Kratos eventually sees some monsters fighting each other, which is really neat, but ignores them and pushes forward, eventually coming to some stronger satyrs. So, the main fodder enemies you've been fighting in this game are satyrs. They are not like the satyrs that you dealt with in God of War 1. But these stronger satyrs are the kinds of satyrs you fought in God of War 1, and I don't like dealing with those satyrs, because they can block your attacks, they can block an entire combo, and then proceed to lay in on you, and you just have to be very, very, very precise with a parry, or I guess just kill everything else and then focus on them, which doesn't really work well when they decide they want to wail on you while you're busy with everyone else. Not to mention they can throw you around the room. But alas, Kratos takes care of them, and then knocks a block down and uses it to climb up to a ledge in front of the laser eyes. Unfortunately, one statue is missing its shield and the other statue is missing entirely, so he'll need to find the shield for the first statue and then find a different way to block the second laser eye. Moving through a newly accessible section of the temple that is known as the Edge of Creation, which is such a badass name for an area. It's like, oh, where are you fighting right now? Oh yes, I'm fighting on the Edge of Creation. Like, come on, that is such a cool name. But he moves forward through this area on the Edge of Creation to find what he needs, eventually finding the man calling for help, who happens to be Perseus. So here's another Greek myth hero that Kratos has to deal with. So Perseus says that he sees Kratos as another test by the fates, and that he has been tested over and over before, and he has come up successful after each test, and decides, yeah, sure, I can beat the god of war. No, he cannot. Perseus cannot beat the god of war. Perseus has a neat mechanic though. He can turn invisible when he puts his helmet on. So Kratos beats him up, crushes his helmet, beats him up again, destroys his sword, then beats him up again and takes his shield before throwing Perseus through a window onto a hook, killing the Greek hero in such a badass fashion. But now, with Perseus' shield, Kratos returns to the statue, sticks the shield on the statue, pushes the statue down off of a ledge and then onto a platform that can be raised up. Then, raising up the platform to block one eye beam, Kratos climbs up using a ladder and parries the other eye beam, destroying the energy shield and the statue creating it. Climbing the newly accessible staircase that was previously blocked off by the wall of energy, Kratos finds the Black Griffin that he killed earlier and takes the Spear of Destiny from his body. Now, like earlier I mentioned, this was the secondary weapon I chose. I freaking love the Spear of Destiny. It is an incredibly fun weapon to use. I keep my dodge roll, which is important. It is quick, it has wide sweeping attacks if you need that, and its main heavy combo, like without, doing like an extra stance or anything, just its basic heavy combo is knocking an enemy into the air and then stabbing them repeatedly while they are in the air. And if you're like positioned right in front of a group, that first hit will knock the whole group into the air and then damage them all in the air. It is an excellent piece of crowd control, and not to mention, its special heavy attack fires a blast of magic that knocks enemies back, that does not use your magic bar. That is important because now you have an instant get the fuck away from me button that doesn't waste magic, so you can just spam it, blowing harpies out of the air or just knocking skeletons or what have you away. It's such a cool weapon. I wish it lasted for more than this game. I really do. I don't actually know if it shows up in the third one, but I'm gonna assume it doesn't, because this game likes to just give you back the basic weapons and equipment after each game, which is, standard for the industry. If I could have another game with the Spear of Destiny, I would totally take it. This is why, God, I'm stuttering over my words. I'm so excited about the Spear of Destiny. I hope they keep the Spear of Destiny just as cool in the remake trilogy that Santa Monica is working on, because if it is just as cool, oh my god, it's gonna be so much fun. Anyway, sorry, I got off on a bit of a tangent there, but with the Spear of Destiny in hand, Kratos comes to an area called the Crossing of the Lowlands. It is a section of what probably used to be a really high bridge, but all that's left of it are the pillars that once probably held a path forward. So what does Kratos do when he's met with insurmountable odds and a massive chasm with only pillars in his way? He climbs across the pillars. He proceeds to have this really, really cool QTE section of grappling with his Blades of Athena from pillar to pillar, swinging across, jumping over massive areas, before finally crashing through into a cave and then coming out at the Great Chasm with the temple, with what I marked as the Temple of the Fates, because I thought it was. It's actually the Palace of the Fates, visible in the distance. Like, deceptively close. It's very close. So you would think, well shit, are we at the end of the game? No, we're not. Moving forward towards the edge of the chasm, Kratos meets a bumbling madman who any lovers of Greek myth and classical stories would recognize as Icarus, the man that flew too close to the sun, but the man that did not care because he knew he was the only one to ever touch the sun. And this madman thinks that it is his right to cross the chasm because they are his wings. No other man shall take this from him. This is his duty, his journey, and no one will ruin it for him, and proceeds to tackle Kratos off the edge of the chasm, only for Kratos to beat the ever-loving crap out of him as they fall before ripping the wings off of Icarus's back and taking them, gliding to safety as both Kratos and Icarus fall into the underworld. Specifically, the area where Atlas sits as he holds up creation. And what happens to Icarus, might you ask? Does he fall and splat on the ground? No, he falls into a pit of lava. The man that flew too close to the sun accidentally fell too close to the magma and stopped existing. But now Kratos needs to find a way to climb back up out of the underworld, and proceeds to climb through and across the Titan Atlas, using Icarus's wings for more traversal. Say it with me now, everyone. I love traversal. There it is. I love it. And the next game that I do a retrospective on will have a lot of fun stuff for me to talk about with traversal. But we're not talking about that right now. That's just a little taste of what you'll be getting into for the next one. But as of right now, Kratos begins his climb back to the surface. Kratos faces off against yet another stone minotaur. Yippee. This was the point where I got really tired of it. Because now this one moves. This one has multiple phases too. This one's second phase causes it to break some stone off a wall, and then Kratos has to jump up onto that wall and then dodge boulders the Minotaur throws before the platform finally comes back up out of the lava. This was the time with this Minotaur boss that I was like, please, no more. Stop reusing this fight. It's not fun anymore. It was a neat novelty the first time. The second time it was kind of okay. They gave me some extra ads to focus on. But this one really felt the pain of just whack, whack, sit for a minute. Whack, whack, sit for a minute. Rinse and repeat for 5 to 10 minutes until the thing finally dies. God, I do not like the Minotaurs. I'm so tired of fighting them. After finally killing it, Kratos comes to an open room where he can see the hand that he needs to climb, but unfortunately he can't reach it because there is a heat source, because in this game, certain heat sources create gusts of air that will help you glide. There's a heat source that's blocked up, and Kratos can't open it right now, so instead, he moves off to the side to find a different way forward. Escaping the open room, Kratos destroys a whole bunch of bug nests before climbing across a wall, then up and over onward, before looping back around to the open room, climbing across the ceiling and breaking the stalagmite or tight thing, whichever one comes from the ceiling. Anyway, breaks a chunk of rock down that falls and breaks open the heat source. Kratos then uses the heat source to glide forward before jumping and gliding from chain platform to chain platform before finally reaching the hand of Atlas. And this is the part in my script where I talked about how much I really love the wings and the extra distance they can give you on jumps, but I kind of got ahead of myself and already ranted about how much I love the wings. But you know what? I'll rant some more. The wings act by holding the button that you use to jump, and they do have a very limited range. You can it's kind of like an exponential slope downward as to how far you go with them until eventually you just plummet. Regardless, getting that extra distance on jumps, even just how satisfying it is from gliding from vantage point to vantage point with these wings. Excellent addition to this game. They really did upgrade the way you move through levels with God of War 2 from the way it was standard in God of War 1 of just climbing and jumping. Finally, Kratos gets to the hand and dodges boulders as he climbs up it. Breaking the chain holding Atlas's hand up, Kratos is then grabbed by the Titan, who tries to crush Kratos for some previous slight. Now, that previous slight would be explained in a side game. I can't remember which one of the two, but I think it's a game I'm going to end up playing and covering. But regardless, Atlas is not very happy with Kratos for whatever Kratos did. But Kratos tells the Titan that he will use the Blade of Olympus to kill the gods, as he is no longer aligned with Olympus. And after some convincing, Atlas decides to listen to Kratos, and he tells him about the war between the Titans and the gods, the Titanomachy, and how Zeus forged the Blade of Olympus to destroy the Titans in a single fell swoop. Convinced of Kratos' resolve to end Zeus and the gods of Olympus, he gives the God of War the fourth magic of the game, Atlas Quake. Now, Atlas Quake is a really fun magic. It is really cool. It is excellent for crowd control and being an extra get the fuck off me button. But unfortunately, it pretty much does the same thing that the lightning ball does, except the lightning ball does it better. I used Atlas Quake a little bit. You essentially just create an earthquake and knock boulders around that hit enemies, but it's not as useful. It's not as useful as lightning ball. And that's pretty much how all of the magic kind of falls into. Like, you get the two things you're going to use for the majority of the game around the beginning, and then you kind of just don't use anything else. I really just stuck with Lightning Ball and Typhus Bane, because even though Atlas Quake was cool, the other stuff was just better. It was just better. It kind of felt pointless. And that is a point that I'm going to have to dock on God of War 2, just even more of the new equipment either making old stuff obsolete or not being as good as the old stuff to warrant being used. They definitely tried to make the game a choose your playstyle instead of how the first one was a use everything you can. So I get a lot of games do the whole use what you like instead of use everything you can. When every single game is doing the use what you like, it makes the very, very few games of use everything you can so much better in that aspect, because they're doing something different. They're doing something different that works. And Santa Monica Studios hit that nail right on the head perfectly. They didn't bend it at all. In God of War 1, everything had a use, and I loved that. It was my favorite thing about God of War 1. But then God of War 2 just doesn't have that. And that's one of the ways that it's kind of a downgrade from the first one. But in any case, Atlas takes Kratos and takes him up all the way to the surface just outside the massive Palace of the Fates, and on the other side of the Great Chasm from where we saw Icarus. Using the wings, Kratos crosses the last few areas of the chasm before finally arriving at the gates to the Palace of the Fates. After slaughtering a horde of monsters, Kratos pulls a crank and finally gets into the Palace of the Fates, but he's in yet another room with a bunch of enemies. Now, this is a spike floor room where Kratos has to dodge the spikes as they come up, as the wall slowly turns, revealing access to different little side chambers, one of which contains the dead Argonaut that stole the crank. So Kratos grabs that crankshaft, then Kratos pulls a rock over, blocking the room from spinning and letting the door out of it open. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to get into this right now. This Palace of the Fates is the beginning of the last 5 hours of the game. Now, before we get into the Palace of the Fates proper, I want to say, every single section, every single area of this game took me roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours, okay? So that's the standard level size that I was conditioned for this game. The Palace of the Fates was a 4.5 hour long level. And you really feel it at the end. The palace itself suffers from a lot of bloating. It went on way longer than it needed to, with extra hurdles that could have just not been there or been implemented into the way that would prevent it from being a hurdle, but you still get the story of it. It's just the first two sections of the Palace of the Fates was great. I loved it. They were, it didn't feel too rushed. But at that point, the palace had gone on for 2 hours. And then you have to go on a third section to find a thing to continue forward. But then, in order to get to the thing you found after that section, you need to do a fourth section. And it's just, I'll explain as we go, but this was the part of the game where I started to get fatigued and started to feel like the game was dragging on. Leaving the room with the crankshaft, Kratos uses it to turn a crank that lowers flames. Now, this room that he's in, the one where he's turning the crank to lower flames, this is going to be the center of the Palace of the Fates. This is the main, I guess kind of like the atrium. Everything loops around to it or comes off of it. And disabling the flames, Kratos moves on to the first of 4 sections of the Palace of the Fates, fighting through several monsters before lifting a huge stone door to find a book in a language he can't read. Luckily for him, there's a man who can translate the book, but he refuses to actually translate. So Kratos has to drag him over to the book in order to get him to read. But to open that door, a pressure plate needs to be held down, and Kratos goes off to find a block that he can use. He pushes the block onto the pressure plate and then starts dragging the man to the book while enemies attack. Kratos fends off the monsters, drags the man to the book, and forces him to read. And turns out the reason why the man didn't want to read this book is because the words in the book are the reader's declaration of a sacrifice for the one who is worthy to enter the Temple of the Fates. And Kratos forces this man to read his final words before bashing his head in on the book, completing the blood sacrifice, and slightly opening the wings to this massive bird in the distance that happens to be the Temple of the Fates. But the wings only open slightly. Kratos needs another blood sacrifice. But after this first one, a vision of one of the Fates deems that he has proved himself worthy to meet the sisters. Then Kratos takes a key from the door that is now unlocked and heads onward to the second section of the Palace of the Fates. Entering the west wing of the palace, Kratos is quickly trapped in a shrinking hallway as it floods with monsters that Kratos must kill before he can press forward. Now, here, I used the spin attack with the Blades of Athena and Atlas Quake to handle the hordes of monsters, and that made it way too easy. This was the only real time that I relied on Atlas Quake. Every other time I tried it and it did not help the situation, so I just left it behind. But here, it was very useful because all of these enemies are the weakest ones, smallest amount of health, meant to die quickly. Getting out of the shrinking hallway, Kratos finds the Garden of the Gods, a small little room with plant life and statues of the main gods of Olympus, one of them being Athena. And Athena urges Kratos not to trust Gaia and to turn away from this path, but our vengeful god of war ignores her. Kratos then comes to a lever room where pulling one lever causes flames on the other side of the room to ignite. And what Kratos ends up having to do is make more blood sacrifices to move forward, killing monsters using the flames. This was one of the few sections where I saw a lot of use of Uriel's head, because you freeze the sirens and then pull the lever to burn them. But again, just like Atlas Quake, this was the only real time I used it, because other than that, there was no real use to use that as opposed to just lightning ball. But completing this blood sacrifice, Kratos then swims through a tunnel of blood and bodies before coming to a room with a frozen statue and a bunch of symbols. This puzzle stumped me because I didn't realize I could climb the wall. I had to look that up. Climbing the wall helped me figure things out very quickly, and I bounced the light beam around the room, solved the puzzle, and moved Kratos onward. After clearing some bug nests and riding a hook up to the next area, Kratos comes to a room full of Cerberuses. This room was very, very difficult, but, and here's the shocker for me, as somebody who does not like fighting Cerberuses, I didn't feel like the section was bullshit. I had to just man up, brain up, focus. And I did, and I got through the Cerberuses with definitely a good bit of work. It was not easy, but it was rewarding. Finally, Kratos comes to the second book and a second translator, but the translator refuses to read for Kratos and jumps to his death in an attempt to halt his progress. Lucky for Kratos, though, there's a painting on the wall that will take him back in time mere moments to before the translator jumps to his death. And there's also a green ball statue that Kratos can use to slow time. So using these two together, Kratos goes back in time before the translator jumped, and then freezes time, or slows time, to grab the translator and force him to read again. This translator urges Kratos to stop what he's doing, but he is ultimately forced to read his final words, consenting to a sacrifice unwantingly, which, air quotes on the consent there, but he reads the words, and Kratos bashes his head in on the book. Another blood sacrifice opens the wings to the Temple of the Fates completely. But, and here's what really started to frustrate me, this isn't the end of the Palace of the Fates. This section right here, this was 2 hours of gameplay. I gave 2 blood sacrifices to open up the wings, but that's not enough. I need to do more. Returning to the main area, Kratos fights off a bunch of Cyclops, and I don't like fighting Cyclops. I just don't. Especially when they're in groups, because they can stun lock you, and the standard Cyclops combo that'll hit you like twice, well, now you've got 2 of them, and they do it back to back, so now you get hit 4 times. I don't feel like the Cyclops were power scaled properly to fight in groups, or maybe I'm just bad at dealing with them, but it ended up coming down to another slow process of hit, hit, wait, hit, hit, wait. And I don't like doing that in fast-paced games. But using the Warrior Skull, which you got from the door from the second blood sacrifice, Kratos opens another door. And here in my notes I wrote, I feel like this palace section is dragging on a bit. And boy howdy, ain't that the underestimation of the century. Fucking hell. This next section, this was the section I told you about way back that was worse than the spinning blades at the Trial of Hades. I despise this coming section I'm about to tell you about with a fiery passion. Fierier than Hades himself. So, the first part of Hell. It is an elevator that Kratos needs to pull the chain to lower, but as he pulls the chain, this spiked ceiling starts to descend on him. But it will keep descending even if he's not pulling the chain. But that doesn't seem too bad. Pull the chain faster than the spike ceiling can get you. Except, no matter how fast you spam the button, it doesn't actually change the speed at which you lower the chain. And this room also has skeletons. Remember when I said that skeletons were fine earlier, but were going to be a big problem later? This is the later. This is it now. The skeletons will jam themselves into the gears of the elevator, making you have to stop and fight them before continuing, just to knock them out of the gears, or they will hit you, knocking you out of your animation, causing you to lose time and for the spike ceiling to approach you. And you don't have time to do the finishers on them, because if you do, the spike ceiling is gonna get you. It's gonna crush you and you'll have to start all over. I had to do this section 3 times. 3 times. You wanna know why? Because at the end I got right to the end, opening the door before the spike ceiling got me, twice. And because the skeletons kept knocking me out of the animation, I got crushed twice. It was pure RNG as to whether or not they would just leave me alone, and I had to use all of my magic on the Zeus light or the Kronos lightning ball just to get them to stun and stay off of me. And I said that was part 1 of Hell, because now we're on to part 2 of Hell. Part 2 of Hell is a rope that you need to climb across to get to the other section of the room. But when you get halfway across, a bunch of archers will spawn and shoot the rope, causing you to fall onto a platform. Then you have to climb up, get rid of the archers, and then climb the wall to continue onward through the room. But here's the kicker. When you go to fight the archers, a bunch more enemies will spawn. Mainly 2 Medusas twice. A total of 4 Medusas, with the archers, and several satyr soldiers. Now why is this Hell? Because this is the part of the game where they have flash freeze. And again, pure RNG. Why is it RNG? Because they would flash freeze me, and then the exact next frame hit me, killing me before I had the chance to even process that I was trapped in stone, much less have enough time to wiggle out of it. This section took me 7 tries. 7 tries because they kept flash freeze killing me. You want to know how I won this part? Pure RNG, and they didn't use their flash freeze once. That was Hell. In a game based on skill and speed, you should not have sections that are entirely dependent on RNG. And for those of you way in the back who don't know what RNG is, RNG stands for Random Number Generator or Random Number Generation. Basically, pure luck. The game decides whether or not you win. This right here broke me. I had to put the game down and come back to it later. Because it was just so ridiculous. I despise this section, and especially with how many times I died, you can start to see why this area was dragging on, because they just kept killing me. But finally, fucking finally, after dealing with the archers and the Medusas, surviving and climbing across, Kratos comes to an area where he needs to grab the ashes of the Phoenix and dunk them into the fire to revive them. Now, this area was a combination of several puzzles, and these puzzles were not too hard, but the first one was very misleading. Now, this game has trained you to see something glinting and think, oh, I can break that. So what's the first puzzle on your way to getting the ashes of the Phoenix? There is a breakable wall. There are 2 chains that are your counters for how long the spikes on the floor will stay away once you press the pressure plate. Now, these chains are glinting, so the game has trained me to think, oh, I need to whack those chains and break them to keep the spikes from coming up. But why do we even need to worry about, stopping the chains? Because there's a crank you need to turn to open a gate, and that crank is timed. And this is the first of a couple of this type of puzzle where you just need to freeze time when you have like 4 seconds on something left and just hope you make it in time. I had to look up a walkthrough for this section because I couldn't for the life of me figure out what to do, because I didn't realize that wall was breakable, and I kept trying to break those chains because that's what the game has trained me to think I needed to do. But what I needed to do was stand on the pressure plate to lower the spikes, break the wall, wait for the spikes to come back up, lower them again to restart the timer, pull the crank to raise the gate, and then slow time to get through the gate before the spikes come up or the gate closes on me. If the chains weren't glinting, I guarantee you I would not have had as hard a time with it. But regardless, Kratos moves through the traps, kills monsters, and makes his way up to the urn of the ashes. Now, this last puzzle before the urn, pissed me off to no end. So there's a statue of Daedalus that you need to push through this maze and put on pressure plates. Now, while you're moving through this area, massive walls of flame will shoot out, and you need to hide behind the statue in order to prevent the flames from hitting you. If the flames hit you, they deal a lot of damage. Now, that doesn't seem too bad, does it? Just hide from the flames, push the statue onto the pressure plate. Except this section also has infinitely spawning enemies. And these enemies will knock you out from behind the statue, even if you're blocking, and you will get hit by the flames, because their combos hit you multiple times, which will push you enough out from behind the statue. And dealing with them was so bullshit. It took me so many tries to figure this one out too, because once you get the statue onto the first pressure plate, it lowers down a section of railing that you can push the statue forward to 2 different pressure plates. And you have to figure out which one to put the statue on. Because one pressure plate opens the gate forward. The second pressure plate lowers a chain that Kratos can grapple up to get him to the gate. And the fire doesn't stop, so what you end up having to do is figure out which plate is which by trial and error, possibly dying several times, and then push the statue till it's in front of the pressure plate that opens the gate, so when the fire hits, it pushes it back, and it will stay on there for 2 cycles of fire, which is enough time for you to stand on the pressure plate to lower the hook and then grapple up through the gate. The fact that this section had infinitely spawning enemies that keep knocking me into the fire is why I died so many times. Which is ridiculous. And I ended up using up almost all of my magic to keep them stunned just so I could do what I needed to do. And I hate when games just throw enemies at you to delay you from completing a puzzle while you're in the middle of the puzzle. Putting enemies as a roadblock between puzzles is fine. Putting a limited amount of enemies in a puzzle is fine. But don't give me infinitely spawning assholes that keep delaying my puzzle, causing me to run out of health and die, making me restart the puzzle. I hated this entire section. That was part 3 of hell. But luckily, finally, after that, Kratos gets to the urn and lowers it down into the lava, reviving the Phoenix. And with the Phoenix revived, a massive burst of lava shoots up and carries the Phoenix up out of the Hell Chamber with it, but the Phoenix is stuck in the lava. So Kratos climbs the stairs up out of the area and then blows the horn of Boreas, freeing the Phoenix from the lava that was trapping it and letting it land on a brazier post thingy on the other side of a gap that is too big to jump across. Now, after all of that, we are still not done with the Palace of the Fates. There is a 4th section to this. So, in order to get over to the Phoenix, we need a gust of hot air to shoot up from the little grate in the center of this larger room. Standing on the pressure plate will open up the grate, but getting off of it will immediately close it. So, we need to find something to weigh it down. Which leads into a puzzle of Kratos going off to a 3rd section. Granted, this section is a lot smaller, but it still didn't need to be here after this. But Kratos completes this puzzle of moving a block around and then using it as a ledge to climb up, and then comes to a dark hallway with the soldiers saying that they have come way too far to fail here. So Kratos fights this soldier in the dark, only for when Kratos to stab him and throw him out of the room to realize this was the soldier he sent home after Zeus massacred the Spartan army. Kratos demands this soldier tell him why he didn't go home to Sparta, only for the soldier to tell him that he did. He did go home. But Zeus came and decimated the city, absolutely annihilated Sparta. And the only survivor was this soldier. And this soldier had set off on a way to change the fate of Sparta, only to die at Kratos' blade. And he tells Kratos that he was the last hope from Sparta, but now Kratos is the last hope for Sparta. And this right here, this is probably Kratos' last straw. After Kratos ended up killing his own man, his last loyal soldier, the last living remnant of the Spartan city, a massive kraken appears, and Kratos has to fight off the kraken. And Kratos battles the kraken, tearing off its tentacles one by one before eventually crushing its head through with the bridge that apparently is able to be used now that a tentacle is holding 2 pressure plates down. I don't know why they had to do this. They didn't need to give us this whole section. Granted, I know they wanted this scene between Kratos and the last Spartan soldier. But if you wanted this, maybe make it a part of freeing the Phoenix. You didn't need to add another section, even if it was smaller, on top of this area along with a boss fight. This right here marked the 4-hour point of the Palace of the Fates. It went on far too long. It was needlessly bloated. I did not enjoy playing it. I got so tired of it. But I had to finish the game because, I have this video I need to make. But finally, after killing the Kraken and grabbing onto the Phoenix Kratos leaves the palace and flies to the Temple of the Sisters of Fate, an area that is bathed in a green glow as time is perpetually slowed. Grappling up, Kratos destroys the gem and then destroys another Fate face statue thing before continuing onward through the temple and entering the throne of Lachesis, where Lachesis, the first of the three Sisters of Fate, ambushes Kratos. She attempts to sway Kratos away from his path, convince him not to fight the sisters because this is no power for a mortal. But Kratos refuses to listen, and the two engage in combat. Now, this fight here, this multi-phase fight, this was my favorite boss of the entire game. Because this boss fight consists of Lachesis, Atropos, and then Lachesis and Atropos together. But in order to see Atropos, first we must deal with the first phase of Lachesis. After Kratos defeats Lachesis for a first time, she calls her sister Atropos to deal with Kratos, who takes him through one of the time mirrors back in time to the point in which Kratos and Ares were fighting, and proceeds to do battle with Kratos on the blade of Athena, saying that if she can destroy this blade, she can undo all of Kratos' history. She can make it so he never becomes the god of war and that none of this ever happens. So Kratos battles her and spawning enemies, keeping her from destroying the blade in the past, before badly wounding her and trapping her in the past on the other side of the mirror, before he goes to finish off Lachesis. But as he engages Lachesis for a second time, Atropos comes back through the mirrors with the help of her sister. And now Kratos has to fight off both of them at once, smashing the mirrors one by one to keep Atropos away. Before finally, after smashing the second mirror, Kratos does a finisher on Lachesis, knocks her through the third mirror with Atropos, and then shatters it, trapping them both in a past that is no longer accessible, killing two of the three Sisters of Fate. With these two dealt with, Kratos can finally move on forward. And now this fight, let me tell you about this fight, because I enjoyed it to bits. It was a perfect test of my knowledge of my combos, my ability to dodge, and my ability to parry. I didn't once in this fight feel like I couldn't use my combos because they would lock me into too long of an animation. Granted, I had to use the right combos because some would be too long, or some, she might dodge away out of one of them. But this right here, this boss fight, is a perfect point to show you how good you are at the magic and weapons that you have chosen to level up in this game. They are a perfect test of your skill of multi-managing the different bosses and also dealing out lots of damage while avoiding taking damage. This fight is what every God of War boss fight should be. A test of your skill, but at the same time, an area for you to let loose and show just how badass you are with your moves. But now, with the first two sisters dealt with, there is one sister that stands between Kratos and changing his fate. The last sister, whose name I don't know because I didn't care to look it up. But I will tell you right now, from this point onward, up until the finale, I can't show you any footage. And it's not because I lost it. It's because, once again, indecent monster exposure. So, you'll have to, unfortunately, watch me. Kratos battles through a gauntlet of enemies, enters the Loom of the Sisters of Fate, the Loom of Fate itself, where history is written on tapestry, and then has to deal with the third sister in a puzzle boss. I don't mind puzzle bosses. I actually really enjoy puzzle bosses, but not when the puzzle boss is in a game that is not about puzzle bosses. God of War is about big set pieces and combat. It is not about solving puzzles to defeat your enemies. And this fight, right here, this quote-unquote fight, 3 stages, 2 puzzles, and then a third kind of puzzle that was actually pretty cool. I'll give the third phase, a pass. But here's what happens. Kratos needs to, the first section of the three, Kratos needs to lower a gate and then climb up to the second section. But the gate has bodies stuck in it, so it won't lower. And two of the last sister's hands are smacking around that are keeping Kratos from turning the cranks. So Kratos has to stun one hand, turn a crank to open up a different path, climb across the ceiling to break the bodies that are trapped in the gears, drop down, stun the second arm, and then lower that gate to finally climb up and move on to the second area. And the second area of this puzzle, on paper, shouldn't be that bad. It is more dealing with arms. She's got 3 arms on this level that need to be dealt with one by one in order to move forward. The first one is very simple. You open up a grate, you stun her hand, that causes her hand to fall in the grate, then you close the grate, trapping her hand. The second one, you have to stun her hand, climb up a rope, and pull a lever to drop a spear down onto her. And now, logically, that shouldn't be too hard, right? Except this area either was really buggy on my copy, or they didn't play test this properly. Because the collision to grab the rope that you need to climb was ridiculously bad. Like, I would keep grabbing it and Kratos would either immediately let go of it, or he just phase through it. He wouldn't grab it at all. And this took me 15 minutes of trying to just grab the goddamn rope. And now her arms will unstun after a certain amount of time. So I'm constantly stunning her arm, trying to grab the rope. Oh no, stun her arm again, try to grab the rope again, I missed it again, stun the arm, rinse and repeat for 15 minutes before I finally managed to stun her arm, grab the rope, and jump up to the platform to pull the lever, dropping the spear down. Now from this section, the next area, it looks like you should be able to grab the rope that the spear is attached to, which you can grab, by the way. I don't know why it lets you grab this rope when you don't need to, but you grab this rope, so you think, oh, I need to jump from this rope to the next lever, right? No, you don't. You can't access the lever from this part. What you end up needing to do is move a vase around the circular area and then stun her arm, which, granted, the game taught you that you need to take care of the arms before you can move the urn, only to find out, no, actually this time you need to stun the arm and then move the urn instead of getting rid of the arm entirely. Then you put it into this section that has 2 graspers, and you then, with the urn attached to the graspers, pull the urn back, which has another of the rope spears onto it. And then you just stun her arm and she just grabs this spear, stabbing her hand, and then it drops down and pins her hand down, I guess? This section of this puzzle boss was ridiculous, because the collision didn't work right. I had to go against what the game taught me to do, and then trying to climb a rope to continue. No, you don't climb that rope. You don't climb either of the ropes, except you do climb the second rope. You climb the second rope on the second spear, because that takes you up to the lever that you pull to move to the third section. It was not put together properly, or not put together well. This might have been how they designed it intentionally, but if it was, then it is not a good design. But finally, after that, you get to phase 3 of this puzzle boss, and phase 3 of this puzzle boss is actually really cool. So there are these 2 levers on either side of the area, and now at this point you're at her upper torso, where it's got her 2 arms and her head. There are 2 time freezing statues on either side of her, and if you pull these levers, it will cause the strings to coil up and reveal bodies. These bodies will grant you a massive amount of health. And so that teaches you that you need to be pulling these levers to raise up the string. But currently, they are attached to the wrong string cables. So what you have to do is stun her arms, pull a crank to adjust which strings they're attached to, and then pull another lever to raise that string up, to raise up one of these swinging saw blades from the bottom, and then you have to turn it and then swing it into her face. That was really cool. That was an excellent set piece. That is how, if you're going to do a God of War puzzle boss, you do that puzzle right. The other two sections of it were either, it's fine, or my god, this sucks. And if you're noticing a trend, this end of this game, I hated playing. Story-wise, it was great, but it is not sticking the landing with the gameplay at all. But now, finally, with all three Sisters of Fate dead and dealt with, Kratos can finally change his fate, which leads to a puzzle of him finding the right thread to pull, pulling it back to the time right before Kratos was killed, and then using time, which, granted, the first few attempts at this, I didn't realize I was supposed to be using the time statues, so it did piss me off, but that one was entirely my fault. He uses the time statue to slow time, because once you have the right time locked in, you are on a 30-second timer to get up to the portrait mirror thingy to get back in time. But Kratos successfully gets back in time and stops Zeus from killing him. Kratos takes his power back, taking the Blade of Olympus from Zeus, only for Zeus to knock them up a mountain before they both do battle as the final boss of God of War 2. This fight was really hard. I had to lock in, but it also dragged on. And get ready for more of me complaining about the ending of God of War 2. So this fight is a 5-phase boss, which, I don't have problems with on principle, but my problems come with how these phases are done. The first phase has Zeus in a massive god form that is smacking the arena and everything as sirens spawn, and Kratos needs to kill sirens with finishers to release blasts of energy that will damage Zeus. And after doing enough of that, he will take on his small human-sized form and proceed to battle Kratos. And this part is where it dragged on. This is where the 5-phase boss should have been a 3-phase boss, because the next two phases are repeated twice. The first phase has Kratos fighting Zeus while Kratos is wielding the Blade of Olympus. And then when you complete that phase, he does a finisher on Zeus, causing a piece of the arena to drop on him, only for Zeus to take the Blade of Olympus from Kratos, and now you have to fight Zeus without the Blade of Olympus. And when you complete that phase, you take the blade back, and then rinse and repeat that twice. You didn't need to have you go from Kratos has the Blade of Olympus to Zeus has the Blade of Olympus to back to Kratos to back to Zeus to the end of it. It dragged it on way longer than it needed to. But I've been arguing with myself over whether or not this was actually that bad. But here's the thing. Taking this fight alone, just at itself, completely disregarding the last 3.5 hours of gameplay, that's a fine boss. It's fine. It's fun. It's great. But when you add this 5-phase boss that should have been a 3-phase boss on the end of all of the bullshit prior, it really, really starts to suck. But eventually, Kratos seems to surrender. He stabs the Blade of Olympus down and commands Zeus to end his suffering. And Zeus says that he will end Kratos' life, but his suffering is only beginning. Only for Kratos to quickly parry the Blade of Olympus and fight it away from Zeus. But when he goes to stab Zeus to kill him, to finish him off, Athena jumps in the way, sacrificing herself to save Zeus. And Athena didn't need to die here, and Kratos is full of sorrow, weirdly enough, which I think it is a little weird. Why is Kratos so sad about this when he's been dissing Athena and the rest of them this whole time? But anyway, Kratos tells Athena that she didn't need to die here, only Zeus. And then she says that Zeus is Olympus. If Zeus will fall, then all of Olympus falls. And Olympus will stand up to defend their king with their lives, only for Kratos to respond with, then all of Olympus will fall. And then as she fades away into green glimmers, Kratos takes the loom back to the present, and then you have to do the loom puzzle again, which this frustrates me again. So I'm going to finish this part right here and then I'll explain why this frustrates me. Kratos does the loom puzzle again, only to get another cutscene of him going back to the age of the Titanomachy and then taking the Titans from the Titanomachy to the modern day to attack Zeus on Olympus, as Zeus prepares the army and prepares the other gods for the coming hell. Now, why does this frustrate me? Because it's a roughly 35-second puzzle, alright? You do the 35-second loom puzzle, you get a cutscene. You do a boss fight, you get a cutscene. You do the 35-second loom puzzle again, you get another cutscene, then you get the credits. They're just padding it out. They're just stretching this out longer than it needs to. But, finally, after all of that, with the Titans climbing Mount Olympus, that is where God of War 2 ends and leaves off for God of War 3. Now, I've done a lot of complaining the last end of this video. I want to go ahead and say right now, while I do not like the ending and the way the ending is paced, or the way the ending is bloated, I do genuinely love this game. And I think it's because I love this game and this franchise, that's why I'm so overly critical of how this game ends. Narratively, it is the perfect ending to segue into God of War 3. It is the perfect way to end this game. But when you look at the gameplay, when you look at how long it took to deal with the last few hurdles, and then giving me 35 seconds of extra gameplay just to get another cutscene and the credits, it doesn't stick the landing. It just doesn't. Now, the music of this game overall is great. It's more God of War. The gameplay as a whole, in many ways, is an upgrade from God of War 1, but in several ways it is a downgrade. As I've previously stated, God of War 1, every tool in your toolbox had a use. Every single piece of equipment was important and needed. But that's not how it is in God of War 2. And I genuinely think that's a detriment to God of War 2. It should have been as concise as God of War 1. It should have had the same amount of usefulness for all of your gear as God of War 1 did. Will I come back to God of War 2? Yeah, sure. God of War 1 and 2 are probably like a yearly or so replay, but it's not a game that I would immediately jump into New Game Plus for. And I didn't play New Game Plus, so I don't have any footage for that, but going into New Game Plus, you get the Blade of Olympus as your new secondary. Oh, before I forget, that is another thing that God of War 2 does that I really don't like. The fact that the Zeus boss fight replaced my Spear of Destiny, the fully upgraded weapon I've been using, with the Blade of Olympus. The weapon I've been building for the last third of the game did not matter, because I don't get to use it in the final fight. I don't even get to use it in the final 2 fights, because the fight before that isn't even really a fight, it's a puzzle. That is something that when games do that, it really, really irks me. Because it makes all the effort I put into that weapon, all the skill I built up with it, it makes it pointless. It makes it feel like a waste of time. And the worst thing a game can be or do is feel like a waste of time. The worst thing it can make you feel is like you wasted your time upgrading that weapon, or finding all of those collectibles, or playing on this harder difficulty. Now, overall, do I think God of War 2 wasted my time? No, of course not. But in the end, The ending has a lot of things that irk me. The main meat of the game before that is a whole lot of positivity, save for just the repeat of the Minotaur boss. And honestly, if I had to rate this game, I know people love to sing the praises of the God of War trilogy, and granted, they do hold up today. I do think they are a little overhyped. And flame me for that all you want in the comments. I fully accept that. It is a very, very spicy take that I don't feel like they deserve as much of the praise as they get. They definitely deserve most of it, don't get me wrong. But it's still, it's got its issues. And as somebody who loves God of War, who adores this franchise, I have to point out the issues. Now, granted, when you played, you might not have had the same issues that I had. Maybe you did find a reason for every tool in your toolbox. Maybe you don't care about that change of just play with what you want. Maybe you really liked how the ending of the game was paced. Maybe you enjoyed having a second go at that 35-second puzzle. Maybe you really enjoyed the 4-hour section that was the Palace of the Gods. But this is my retrospective. This is my thoughts, and that's where my thoughts lie. So thank you all so much for watching. I apologize for how long this video took to get out. I'm sitting at 24 pages of notes, and a lot of time wasted because I recently remembered that I never actually finished My Hero Academia. I know, he's watching My Hero Academia, what a lame show, or, oh my god, you watch My Hero Academia, who's your favorite character? By the way, my favorite character is Sero. No, I'm just kidding, it's Midoriya. I'm a basic bitch. But I ended up binging all 8 seasons in a week and a half, which ended up having me kind of put this video on the sidelines, and I kind of forgot to put as much effort, getting more stuff done with it, which is why it's ended up taking so long to get out. I don't even know, as of recording this, when I'm going to end up posting it, but, I apologize for the wait. Thank you guys for being patient. Thank you guys for listening to me rant. If you disagree with my stance on God of War 2, leave it down in the comments. That's what they're there for. If there's anything you feel like I should have touched on, or maybe something, you feel like I could do better, again, leave it down in the comments. That's what it's there for. But I think this is where I sign off. I'll see y'all next time. Strider Fox, out.